Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Denver. I'm Nick Miller alongside Vikram. Kudva, how are you doing, sir?
Not bad, sir.
Thanks for joining me here for the Open Series Spotlight. You've got yourself into the top 8 with an awesome Esper Tokens deck.
Yeah.
Just really took the tournament by surprise. You've got a full 4 Monastery Mentor. One thing that's missing from the deck, though, is we kind of saw this deck when it emerged at the GP, no Secure the Wastes.
Yeah, so as I was testing this deck online, I found myself tapping out a lot. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to leave up certain amounts of mana for a Secure the Waste. So in that place, in the place that I would have normally had that, I'm actually have an Omnixilis instead. I felt like that would also help me in the scenarios that Secure the Waste would help, but it would follow the plan that I'm trying to play in terms of a tap out kind of tempo deck with Monastery Mentor and with Seeker of the Way and with Gideon.
Right. So we see Seeker of the Way here, a card we've seen for quite a while now, paired with the Mentor, of course. And you've got a lot of cheap spells that can kind of help your prowess here and generate tokens.
Right.
Most importantly here, 4 Duress. This is a card we haven't seen, break through this much in the main deck in 4 copies.
Yeah.
But you got 4 copies here. Why is this card so good?
So every deck in the format has some number of targets that you want to get rid of prior to casting it. The biggest reason you want Duress in your deck is to safeguard Mentor and Seek of the Way early and Jace. And also in the late game, it can be a good card against their late game top decks or the counter spells that they're holding up for the Mentor that you draw. And worst case, late game, I can just cast it when my opponent has no hand if I have a Monastery Mentor.
Right.
Trigger prowess and go from there.
I was going to say on top of that, you've got Silk Wrap, a card we've seen very good. Obviously works great with your low creatures here, able to get prowess. You can actually turn that stuff on early while being proactive. Of course, you got Jace and Gideon too, which all kind of helps out with that. Now you got some other interesting ones in here too. You got 2 Ojutai, you got 2 Murderous Cut, and 2 Treasure Cruise. Take us through the decisions on those cards.
So a lot of the removal in this deck is Sorcerer's Speed. You really want at least some number of instant speed removal spells like Murderous Cut against mono red with haste creatures, and against like Rally where you need to kill them as they're comboing off, or kill the Zulaport Cutthroat as they're comboing off. The other 2 cards are meant for the late game. Ojutai and Treasure Cruise is meant for whenever we're in a top deck war, that those cards will break open the game real fast if they're not answered. Treasure Cruise has been insane with all the early spells and with creatures getting traded off. Treasure Cruise is usually like a 2 or 3 mana spell, sometimes even a 1 mana spell if I draw it late. So it's been really good.
All right, so you've grown with Treasure Cruise as your draw spell. What are the pros and cons of running that over something like Painful Truths, and also, of course, its counterpart, Dig Through Time?
So specifically for Dig Through Time, 2 blue mana is actually exceedingly hard to do for this deck and be on curve. So you only run 5 blue sources, so you don't want to go too ham on any sort of blue spell, which is why Treasure Cruise in this particular deck is better than Dig Through Time. In terms of Painful Truths, it's actually about the same. I don't, outside of Seeker and the one of Sorin that I have, I don't actually have a lot of lifelink that I can offset the damage that I'm going to be taking. It's good, don't get me wrong. I just didn't feel that it was necessary past the Treasure Cruises in the deck.
Right. Of course, you got some one-ofs, Ultimate Price. You mentioned the Omnixilis, the Sorin, Outer End, and Ruinous Path. Cards that can just be catch-alls in certain situations.
Right.
What are you looking to prey on in the metagame, and what were your kind of weaknesses with this deck at the tournament?
So the big weakness that I had going into the tournament was a target red. Normally they would get out way too fast, and unless I had, in the main board, unless I was able to duress one of their combo or have one of my instant speed removal spells, they would normally just combo me out and kill me. I'm trying to prey on late game kind of decks. So we're talking about Ramp, we're talking about Jeskai Black, sometimes Esper Dragons, though I've had about a 50-50 matchup against them. And then I'm about a 50-50 against Abzan, which is probably where I wanted to be anyway going into this, since I thought that Abzan was going to be probably played a little bit more than I guess the top 8 shows, but...
well, Abzan was the most represented deck on day 2, so whether it makes top 8 or not, you're still correct in assuming that those 3 decks you mentioned, Abzan, Atarka Red, and Jeskai Black, were the 3 big decks. All right, so for our writer who's going to take the deck through a daily, any advice for them throughout the matchups or anything? Any tips they might not see on the surface?
I mean, as I was playing through the deck, the deck feels very self-explanatory most of the time. There are some lines, some sequencing of the lines that kind of change based off of the matchup. Sometimes you want to play Duress after the Mentor. Sometimes you want to play Duress before Mentor to potentially prevent counter spells. Because you wanna have Mentor resolve and stick at least a turn so you can get some value out of it. Jamming Monastery Mentor is definitely not a thing you want to do on turn 3.
Sure.
It's unless you know exactly what your opponent is on, and you know he can, unless your opponent draws a removal spell, he should stick to untap. Which happened a couple of times, one of which happened against Todd Anderson. I knew that he didn't have anything, so I played Mentor. And then played Duress afterwards. Normally in that kind of matchup, I want to play Duress first so that any sort of counter spells is out of their hand. Other than that, the deck itself is pretty self-explanatory.
Take us through the sideboard real quick. You got Infinite Obliteration. We've seen this be just very good against the Eldrazi decks.
Yes.
That kind of stuff. You got, and we'll go over the removal after that.
Sure. So Infinite Obliteration is kind of a catch-all for some of the more annoying creatures in the format. Ulamog is the biggest one, obviously, with a ramp. I don't play Despise. The deck used to play Despise, at least with the deck I started with. I actually started with the top 4 deck from GP Kobe run by Shota Takao. That was running a couple of Despises. As I was testing, I didn't see it being super great, so I replaced the Despises and the Valor Stances with Silk Wraps. But because I don't have the Despises main, I need some way to deal with tricky creatures prior to them landing on the field.
Sure.
So, sometimes I bring it in against Abzan, against Rhino.
Sure.
But Ulamog's the big one.
Got a bunch of removal in here, and for ultimate price, you got some Surge of Righteousness, Self-Inflicted Wound, Planar Outburst, Languish, just shoring up the aggressive matchups.
Right, so a lot of the removal in the main is or at least some of the one-ofs aren't as good in some matches as others. So I want to make sure that I can replace that with a better removal. So for instance, the Utter End would turn into Surge of Righteousness, or the Obnixilis would turn into Ultimate Price in some matchups.
Okay. Outside of that, you got a couple counter spells here: Dispel and Disdainful Stroke for the control matchups, I assume.
Yep.
Mastery Unseen as well.
Yeah. So the counter spells are specifically for control and for Jeskai Black. A lot, like Dispel specifically, they have a lot of instants. I don't really want them to cast them. So it's pretty good when you go turn 4 Mentor, leave up Dispel. You know your Mentor is basically going to get you value regardless. So other than that, I run a couple of Wraths for wide decks for Atarka Red sometimes goes wide with tokens. I run Planar. I have one of Planar Outburst for Abzan. And then Mastery of the Unseen specifically is there for Jeskai Black and control Esper Dragons.
Sure.
Because they don't have a lot of ways to deal with enchantments, and that is one enchantment that, when it comes down, could take over the game very easily because I don't use any resources, and they're whittling down the resources to kill 2/2s.
Well, the deck looks great. You've secured yourself a top 8 berth here, so we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me here on the sideboard, and hope you enjoy the video.
Thank you very much.